Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Some numbers on money. The Treasury took in a record amount of money from individual taxes in the last 12 months, $1.863 trillion. At the same time, our deficit went up to $779 billion. James, that's not supposed to happen. We've got 4% growth and a rising deficit and record tax income.
Yeah, so some things have changed since the financial crisis. The United States is growing faster now, but the story of the last 10 years, if you looked at the picture of our finances, you would say this looks like a country at war. These massive deficits, and they continue now. And what's driving it now is interest expense on the debt.
Is that right?
Along with higher defense and higher entitlement programs. So I think maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but soon there is going to be a reckoning where politicians in Washington will have to look again. You remember, nobody liked the sequester where they cut defense and they cut social programs. But I think we're going to see increasing pressure to get there as these interest rates go back to normal levels. That's good. The economy functioning again, doing really well. But it means Uncle Sam is paying more to borrow. And that pressure is going to get more intense next year.
It's the third rail of American politics, though, isn't it? Because what you really have to do is reform Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. You've got to reform them to save them. But trying to do that is an absolute nightmare.
Right, and we should point out it's not as big yet as those. The fastest growing entitlement program in the last year is Obamacare. So you saw how difficult it was trying to fix that, but that problem has not gone away.
Okay, John, what effect on the market? 4% growth and a rising deficit. Not supposed to be like that.
It's not going to have any effect on the market, not for a number of years, as James pointed out. The problem you have right now is not necessarily rising interest rates. It's these buffoons we have in Congress. They can't balance the checkbook. Look, the revenue coming into the Treasury went up 50% under President Obama. We're still running $1 trillion deficit. This has nothing to do with revenue coming in. You've had 4 tax cuts in the last 100 years under Coolidge, Kennedy, Reagan, and Bush. Every time, revenue has gone up going to the Treasury, and the GDP has accelerated. The problem this time now is these guys want to get reelected, and they will not balance a budget. I don't care how much money comes into it.
But no impact on the market.
No impact for now. James is right. Eventually, this is going to be a day of reckoning, but it takes a lot longer than what you think to become Greece. It could be 20, 25 years before there's a day of reckoning.
I don't think America becomes Greece.
I don't think they do, but Stuart, how could they not? I mean, I don't think they're going to become Greece. We can print money. Greece can't do that because they're in the EU. We can print our way out of this. We can default on debt. There's going to be a day of reckoning. We had debt double under President Bush. We had debt double under President Obama. We're back to $1 trillion deficits. President Obama is doing some wonderful things with the economy. We're at 4% growth, but we're not balancing anything. And sooner or later, that's going to come home to roost.
You misspoke. President Trump is doing great things with
President Trump. I apologize.
It is Wednesday, the 17th of October of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? Well, we have a President of the United States and a few of his family members, and probably quite a bit of his administration, who are all, looks like, accomplices to murder after the fact. That's where we are now. No other president has ever been caught doing that. Now, you might be able to argue that it's happened before, but no one's been caught. So, I can hear Trump right now. Where's my Roy Cohn when I need him? Well, Roy Cohn is dead, and you disowned him before he died anyway. So, you reap what you sow. Oh, boy. Gruesome. I don't want to get too much into the story of Khashoggi and his last minutes in this realm of existence. But it was savage and brutal, and nobody should have to endure that. Why do we do these things to our fellows? Okay. And apparently it's okay because, the guy was in the way. And Trump stood to make a lot of money. And this guy was stepping on some toes. Unbelievable. Trump really wanted to dismember him himself, but he's a germaphobe, so you have a proxy do it for you. Okay, that's what we do. We have others do our dirty work for us. It could have just also been an offering. Look what we're capable of doing for you, Herr Führer. For you. I don't know. I think a few of these people really need to be in jail, and I don't mean outside our borders. We don't need to charge MBS or MSB. What is this guy? Bin Salman. So MBS. There's plenty to charge right here and right now. And I'm also curious, would this fall under the aegis of a Mueller investigation? I mean, the cover-up of a murder? Or is this like one of these constitutional crises because the president has, the power to push foreign policy the way he sees fit? I don't know. What's on the rest of the menu today? I mean, we do have a curated show for you. We do. There's so much out there that we had to, hone it in on a few tidbits here and there and make it into a fulsome meal for you today. Well, at the top, that was Stuart Varney and a few of the others wondering what the hell, the deficit. The deficit is still rising, but just don't say tax cuts. That's not the reason, no. Everything else but that. Okay. All I can say is that they were told ahead of time what would happen, and now it's happening. On the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the Interior Department selected a Bundy supporter who favors war against the Bureau of Land Management to serve as its senior legal advisor. Wow. To me, the parallels are so obvious. Like Nazi Germany in the 20s, late 20s, early 30s. But don't listen to me. The head of the EPA's Children's Health Office, who was placed on administrative leave 3 weeks ago without explanation, fears that kids are disposable under Trump. Well, of course they are. Have you ever seen Trump hug Barron? In fact, where the hell is Barron? What? Trump never even plays catch with Barron. Talk about an absent father. And Portland, Oregon police did not arrest any right-wing militias they discovered in sniper positions and with caches of weapons on city rooftops ahead of a large demonstration recently. But they did arrest scores of liberal protesters for not complying with their authority fast enough. Oh, did I mention that they also failed to tell the mayor they found a bunch of right-wing militias on city rooftops in sniper positions with caches of weapons? Yeah, it's a scandal. Well, after the break, we then move to the chef's table, where Democrats are outraising Republicans by millions of dollars in California's most competitive House races. Well, well, well. And a newly discovered charcoal inscription points to a date change for the Pompeii eruption. Everybody said it seemed like it was more in the fall rather than in the summer, but now we know. All that and more in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You can determine if you are registered to vote in the state that you reside, and also register to vote in those states in which you are still able to do that. So hurry up. And you never know. I live in a state that it's motor voter registration. You're automatically registered when you register or get your car or get a license or any sort of check in with the state government. And but I still don't leave it to chance. You never know. I live in a state that probably wouldn't purge us, but you never know. So do check it out, and also make sure that you vote. All right. Wow, the turnout in Georgia. That is an amazing number. 3 times the amount of people voting on the first day. And also with the mail-in ballots, absentee ballots that have already come in. 3 times the amount as the last midterms. Well, that says something now, doesn't it? If you then go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Check out her shows on Saturday at the table with Kelly Lincoln, 3 p.m. on the West Coast. That would be 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And then later on, she teams up with Ricky, and they command the Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour. And that begins at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast, and a power hour it is indeed. To the leftish of the chat room link is the contribute button. Do please become a Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your help keeps the bills paid, and then keeps us a little bit under the radar so we can resist as we were meant to be. And thank you so much for your generosity. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. You can follow us on Facebook and all sorts of other social media platforms. It is amazing. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I do post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime on Daily Codes, where I can also be found as Justice Putnam. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. We're over there on Facebook, just as West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. So there you go. And do pick up podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, this first article out of Think Progress is a little bit of a deeper dive than I normally do, but I just thought that we would get into it anyway, so I put it up top. It's by Mark Hand, is the reporter here, and this person who's been put in as the Interior Senior Legal Advisor, was set to head the Bureau of Land Management. But she's a far-right militant sympathizer, and she did withdraw her name from consideration, probably because she's on record saying that she'd really like to blow up the BLM. I don't know. I don't know what they mean by that. You mean like with a fertilizer truck bomb? Some people thought that. So I don't know. Maybe you don't want them running the Bureau of Land Management. They might try to blow it up from within. The Department of Interior has selected Karen Bud Phelan, an anti-public lands advocate, for a senior legal position at the department. The move is controversial. Bud Phelan is an ally of right-wing extremist Cliven Bundy, who is best known for leading an armed 2014 standoff with federal officials in Nevada after he refused to pay his grazing fees. You know, this guy's a bad neighbor. This is really all it's about. They just don't want to be a good neighbor. All of his other neighbors were fine with the Bureau of Land Management's grazing fee structure, and also tried not to despoil the countryside. But not this guy. And he didn't even take care of his cattle. They'd be dead and desiccated out in the desert. He didn't care. Well, this senior legal advisor now for the Interior is a Wyoming-based property rights attorney who worked as a member of the Trump administration's transition team for the Interior Department. She is scheduled to begin work on November 1st as the Deputy Solicitor for Parks and Wildlife, working on issues related to endangered species, wildlife refuges, and national monuments. Oh, all the things that Trump said he's dismantling. Well, I guess you got a dismantler right there working for you now. She's going to be in the interior of Interior. They always said they corrupt it from within. The attorney had reportedly been previously considered to lead the Bureau of Land Management, but Phelan withdrew her name from consideration for the top BLM spot in March, claiming the decision was made after she was asked to sell her interest in the family ranch. I can't do that. Others contend she withdrew because her anti-public lands and anti-federal land management positions raise questions about her ability to pass Senate confirmation. You would think. Let's see. In November 2017, when Bud Phelan was being considered to head the BLM, she gave a talk in Montana that drew more than 100 protesters who picketed outside the event in the town of Hamilton. They hoped to call attention to her track record of support for privatizing public lands. Among her many anti-environment views, Bud Phelan strongly opposes the Endangered Species Act, despite the law's successes. She has referred to it as a sword to tear down the American economy, drive up food, energy, and housing costs, and wear down and take out rural communities and counties. Okay, I'm sorry, but at some point, higher authorities had to come in to tell people to stop peeing in the stream because people downstream are getting diphtheria, okay? So come on. Bud Phelan also opposes the National Environmental Policy Act, a landmark law that requires extensive environmental review of infrastructure and other types of potentially harmful projects during the regulatory review process. For decades, Bud Phelan has been a leading voice in the so-called county rights movement. Yes, an offshoot of the fringe county supremacy movement that believes county sheriffs have ultimate authority over the federal government and can choose whether or not to enforce U.S. laws because there is a IQ maximum that they're allowed to have, even for county sheriffs. Otherwise, you wouldn't have this idea that the county sheriffs are supreme to the federal government. What is this, the sheriff of Nottingham? Yeah, that's exactly what they think they are. I'm serious. I'm not kidding. In 1989, Bud Fallon represented Bundy and his neighbors in a lawsuit against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service over the listing of the desert tortoise as an endangered species, although she believed Bundy had broken the law by refusing to pay raising fees. Bud Fallon stated that she totally got what drove Bundy to do what he did and predicted, "I think you're going to see more of that because we're not left with any choice." Wow, they're trying to make an offer that none of us can refuse. Try it. 25 years later, Bud Fallon insisted the BLM used too much force during the 2014 Bundy Ranch standoff. I don't know what she means by that. It was the right-wing militias that came and took up sniper positions once again on the high ground and bore down on federal officers who mostly came unarmed. And it was the feds that used too much force? I think not, lady. Like Bundy, Bud Fallon contends the Constitution requires the federal government to own only military and post offices and does not give it the right to control government-owned lands or regulate what people do on these public lands. Yeah, well, tell it to Teddy Roosevelt. Bud Fallon's views on public lands align with Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke and other Trump administration officials. Under Zinke's leadership, the Interior Department has emphasized the value of fossil fuel extraction and other industry endeavors on public lands. Accessing oil, gas, and coal reserves, for example, were key factors in the decisions by the Trump administration to shrink the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante national monuments in Utah. Mark Hand of Think Progress also brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes, it looks like Children's Health Chief Ruth Etzel was placed on administrative leave 3 weeks ago without explanation. And the administration is refusing to consider any new regulations to protect children from environmental hazards, according to Dr. Ruth Etzel. And in particular, Etzel sounded the alarm about ongoing risk to children from lead contamination. Interesting. The water crisis in Flint, Michigan, led to calls for a national strategy to protecting children from lead poisoning, but when Trump took office, the message at the EPA was that no new regulations would be considered to help children avoid lead contamination, Etzel said in an interview with CBS that was broadcast on Monday. Children younger than 6 years are especially vulnerable to lead poisoning, which can severely affect mental and physical development. And you do know, of course, that when lead was taken out of our gasoline, crime went down. A direct correlation from lead being taken out of gasoline, and then a few years later, a precipitous drop in crime. Isn't that interesting? She said that, "My sense is that the new government has absolutely no intention of taking any action towards seriously changing lead in children's environment," Etzel said. "It basically means that our kids will continue to be poisoned. It basically means that kids are disposable, that they don't matter." Well, the Trump administration then placed Etzel on administrative leave in late September after getting no explanation from Trump officials on why she was placed on leave. Etzel chose to speak out about how the Trump EPA is neglecting to take measures to protect children from lead poisoning and other environmental hazards. Well, obviously, she's not a loyal soldier. Etzel, a pediatrician and epidemiologist who has been a leader in children's environmental health for 30 years, joined the EPA in 2015 after having served as a senior officer for environmental health research at the World Health Organization. Etzel reportedly is not facing disciplinary action and is continuing to receive pay and benefits. Oh, I see. Of course she's not a Trump loyalist. She loves America instead, which obviously is the highest standard of treason in the Trump administration's view. In the interview with CBS, Etzel said she often views the Office of Children's Health Protection as the conscience of the EPA. Her office is often nagging at other agency officials, constantly asking, is this okay for children? Are you sure this is okay for children? Well, of course I'm going to get rid of her. Nobody there likes kids. They hate kids. Look how they treat Barron. Poor Barron. Since Trump took office, his administration has taken numerous actions that do not bode well for the future health of American children. Beyond the EPA, for example, Trump wants to fix the federal deficit caused by his tax cuts by cutting billions from children's health care. Our message is no longer welcome. The message that children are not little adults and they need special protections is not welcome, Etzel said. She has not had a one-on-one meeting with either former EPA Administrator Pruitt or Acting Administrator Andrew Wheeler since the Trump administration took office to discuss children's health and environmental issues. But she appears prepared to find other ways to advocate for children's health while she remains on administrative leave. If the EPA won't let me tell about how children are being poisoned, I'll just tell the mothers and fathers directly. I have the right, whether or not EPA wants me on their staff. Also from Think Progress brings us this last offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, it looks like cops came upon a bunch of right-wing militias on rooftops in Portland, Oregon in the lead-up to a big demonstration by a bunch of right-wing militia types, by the way. And, of course, counter-protesters are going to be there because people don't like fascism. They don't like brown shirts taking over their streets. You'd think that this was America now, wouldn't you? Well, they not only discovered these right-wing militias and then did nothing about it, they also didn't tell any city officials for almost 2 months. 2 months. Discovering a far-right group stationed on a rooftop with a stockpile of weapons overlooking a major demonstration might rattle most people, especially if that group has a documented history of clashing with counter-protesters, but evidently not the Portland Police Bureau. On Monday, it was revealed that prior to a major protest in the city on August 4th, which ended in brutal clashes between far-right and anti-fascist demonstrators, Portland officers discovered individuals affiliated with the group Patriot Prayer had positioned themselves on a rooftop parking structure with a cache of firearms, including long guns. No arrests were made, and no one outside of the police department, not even the mayor, was informed about the incident until now. The news comes after a weekend of far-right violence on both the East and West Coasts. On Friday, the Proud Boys, a far-right group which has repeatedly worked with Patriot Prayer, attacked several people near the Metropolitan Republican Club in New York City, shouting on one occasion, "Are you brave now, faggot?" And on Sunday in Portland, Patriot Prayer leader Joey Gibson organized a flash march for law and order, which ended in brawls between the group and counter-protesters. According to reports, police at that demonstration did not intervene to stop the violence. In response to the attacks in New York, the NYPD announced Monday evening that it was looking for 12 individuals, 9 of them Proud Boys and 3 of them counter-protesters allegedly involved in the brawls. Police said they believed they had evidence to bring charges against them. Officers arrested only 3 people the night of the attack, all of them counter-protesters. How dare you attack that brown shirt with your head on his boot? Don't you know you can sprain his ankle? The revelation that police in Portland kept quiet about the rooftop protesters and their cache of firearms. They weren't protesters, they're snipers. Please. Is only likely to reinforce the sense among counter-protesters that police have adopted a biased approach toward dealing with the two sides. This was further emphasized during the August 4th demonstration in Portland, when a counter-protester was nearly killed after he was shot in the back of his head by police with a flashbang grenade and was only saved by his helmet. And looks like mainstream Republicans are working overtime to help normalize Patriot Prayer and the Proud Boys, most clearly emphasized by the fact that their founder, Gavin McInnes, was invited to speak at the Metropolitan Republican Club to begin with. Let's get to our break, and when we come back, we're not going to fight fire with these fellows. They want street brawls. They want to do the brown or black shirt thing. I say don't give it to them there. We'll take them to the courts, and we'll deplete their funds. Let's try that. All right, let's get to our break, and when we come back, we will be going through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, another A Star is Born is born. We all know what happens when producers in Hollywood have a proven formula, so the success of the new A Star is Born shouldn't be a surprise. Counting a 1932 film with the same plot but a different title, this is the 5th iteration of this male-female celebrity relationship drama featuring an ascendant female star on a reverse career trajectory from her love interest. Between the 1957 one and the Streisand-Christopherson picture in '76, the stars went from the acting world to the music world as the latter's profile increased. Yes, the remakes do update, and in this new star there's a sort of interesting, if superficial, overlay of the rock versus pop thing going on within the standard pillorying of the cold, callous industry. As well, there's an update on gender roles in this one and on the way alcoholism is treated. As a piece of movie making, this A Star is Born is fine. It's Bradley Cooper's directorial debut, and it's clear that he's picked up a thing or two in his storied career in front of the camera. He has a scene early on in a parking lot of an all-night grocery store where Cooper's rock icon Jackson coaxes an a cappella performance of some of Allie's original material. He's all a-gaga, pun intended, and this particular magic moment that's central to the picture is wonderfully captured. Pacing does become a minor issue in the film's second half, however. It's clear that this isn't Lady Gaga's last picture, and a tip of the hat is also due Sam Elliott as Jackson's much older brother. As long as celebrity and identity and the public's perception of it continue to define pop culture, this story will remain fascinating, and it's a safe prediction that in another generation or so, we'll have yet another A Star is Born. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In 2017, approximately 1 in 6 high school students reported a sports or physical activity-related concussion. Immediate symptoms of a concussion include headache, nausea, and double vision. Long-term, the effects of such injuries, particularly those that are more severe, can be life-changing. Healthcare providers, coaches, trainers, and parents should be aware of the symptoms of a concussion and how to treat them. A concussion protocol should be developed that includes withholding an athlete from practice and competition until all symptoms are resolved. While concussions cannot always be prevented, they can be treated in a way that decreases the chances of long-term health problems. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
White woman, mistakenly believing she was groped, calls police on a black boy.
I'm children's book author Jane Yolen, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Recently, in a Brooklyn, New York deli, a 53-year-old white woman dialed 911 and reported to the police, quote, "I was just sexually assaulted by a child." The video taken inside the bodega shows something very different. What happened is this. A boy who is black and 9 years old, dressed in his school uniform and wearing a backpack, was inside the store. As he turned to talk to someone, his book bag brushed against the backside of the white woman, Teresa Klein, who then called the cops, causing the 9-year-old child and his friend to burst into tears, thinking he was about to go to jail. Ms. Klein, mitigating the situation a bit in a television interview later, said she was sorry. This incident is part of a much bigger story. Too often, police departments are used as instruments of oppression for biased callers. A longtime Flatbush resident who recorded the commotion outside the deli said, quote, "You think something like this only happens in the South, but it's all over the world." Yes, it is. It's a countrywide phenomenon and a countrywide disgrace.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because our children's freedom can't protect itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Donald Trump is defending Saudi Arabia against mounting global condemnation over missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi, claiming the kingdom is being unfairly viewed as guilty until proven innocent.
The president is apparently criticizing, according to the Associated Press, the global condemnation that Saudi Arabia has received over the apparent killing of Jamal Khashoggi. The president saying here in an interview with the Associated Press, quote, "Here we go again with you're guilty until proven innocent." President making a reference here, according to the Associated Press, the president making a reference to the allegations that were facing his Supreme Court nominee and now the Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who the president felt was presumed guilty until there was that FBI expanded background check that some Republicans felt was not enough corroborating evidence to keep him from being on the Supreme Court. But the president talking about this case of Jamal Khashoggi with the Associated Press and saying to the Associated Press, here we go again with you're guilty until proven innocent. It sounds as though that the president is once again taking the denials, accepting the denials from the Saudi government that they did not have any direct ties to the murder of the Saudi journalist, when, of course, there is mounting evidence that says otherwise.
Trump's comments came amid new reports that Khashoggi was killed and dismembered in a plot organized by a high-ranking officer in Saudi Arabia's main intelligence service.
What we understand from several sources is that it was a senior intelligence figure close to Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, the man essential single-handedly in control of Saudi Arabia right now, who organized what the Turkish officials are calling the hit squad to come here to Turkey. And what Turkish officials have briefed CNN about is that Jamal Khashoggi was in fact dismembered in the consulate shortly after he went into the consulate. But what we understand about this so-called hit team, according to Turkish officials, Saudi sources say that it isn't clear if the team came here to rendition him, but they may have injected him with tranquilizers and somehow that went wrong. And one of the sources says that maybe this wasn't authorized by Prince Mohammed bin Salman. That isn't clear. It doesn't pass the sniff test here in Turkey, because what Turkish investigators are finding is they're getting obstruction essentially from the Saudis. When their investigators went into the consulate the night before last, a lot of it had been painted over, we were told, and a cleaning team had gone in moments after it was announced that the investigators would be headed there in a couple of hours. And then, on top of that, when the investigators went to the Consul General's house yesterday, a couple of hours before they arrived there, the Consul General fled the country, flew back to Saudi Arabia. The investigators had gone to his house to search his house and search his vehicles. He's believed to be complicit in this.
Donald Trump has been lying about his ties to Saudi Arabia, tweeting Tuesday, quote, "For the record, I have no financial interest in Saudi Arabia or Russia for that matter. Any suggestion that I have is just more fake news, of which there is plenty." That's not what Trump has been saying for years.
I like the Saudis. They're very nice. I make a lot of money with them. They buy all sorts of my stuff, all kinds of toys from Trump. They pay me millions and hundreds of millions. But you know what? They make $1 billion a day, folks. And whenever they're in trouble, our military takes care. You know, we get nothing. South Korea, crazy is right? Who said that? Stand up. Stand up. He said it's crazy. It's true.
That was Donald Trump in July of 2015. Speaking of lying, Lyin' Ted returned to the stage Tuesday night in the second and final debate between Senator Ted Cruz and Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who's challenging Cruz for his Senate seat. O'Rourke came out swinging.
This is what you can expect over the course of this debate. Senator Cruz is not going to be honest with you. He's going to make up positions and votes that I've never held or have ever taken. He's dishonest. It's why the president called him Lying Ted, and it's why the nickname stuck, because it's true.
Cruz displayed his tone deafness when he was asked about the lack of civility in today's political discourse when he chastised the moderator for trying to ask him a follow-up question.
You are right that there is a loss of civility. There is an anger. There is a rage on the far left that is really frightening. You know, the images hold on, let me answer with it. Don't interrupt me, Jason. The images of a left-wing mob beating on the doors of the Supreme Court. That's not good for our country. We can disagree while treating each other with respect, while treating each other with civility.
Trump sat for a wide-ranging 40-minute interview with the Associated Press on Tuesday, defending Saudi Arabia from growing condemnation over the case of the missing journalist, accusing his longtime attorney Michael Cohen of lying under oath, and flashing defiance when asked about the insult horseface he hurled at Stormy Daniels, the porn actress who accused him of lying about an affair.
The president is essentially taking a victory lap after getting that legal victory yesterday in the Stormy Daniels case, and he's tweeting at her in a language that, frankly, I don't think we've ever heard a president use. He describes her as a horseface and says that he is going to be able to go after her and her third-rate lawyer.
Bloomberg is reporting Wednesday morning that special counsel Robert Mueller is expected to issue findings on core aspects aspects of his Russia probe soon after the November midterm elections, as he faces intensifying pressure to produce more indictments or shut down his investigation. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. A group of up to 2,000 migrants fleeing violence in Honduras caught the attention of President Trump on Tuesday as he urged the Honduran government to stop the group in its tracks or risk losing American foreign assistance. Trump issued similar warnings in April when another caravan made its way through Mexico toward the U.S., saying its members wanted to breach the U.S. border and associating Democratic concern with the migrants' plight with support for open borders, drugs, and crime. The caravan wasn't what Trump cracked it up to be. Just 150 of its members eventually applied for asylum at the Tijuana border, a small fraction of the tens of thousands who typically do so each year. Maureen Meyer is the director for Mexico and migrant rights at the Washington office on Latin America and says this month's caravan is much the same.
We are looking at this more as a humanitarian situation and not some security threat to any of the countries, including the United States.
If Honduras can't stop the caravan, a difficult task since it's now traveled on to Guatemala, scrapping foreign aid that aims to improve conditions in the country so migrants don't leave in the first place could prove self-defeating.
Cutting off aid would probably be the last thing that would help to address the reasons why people feel the need to leave Honduras.
Unlike Honduras, Mexico will have to choose whether to let the caravan journey northward. Mexico's leaders are keen to avoid being seen as callous towards migrants fleeing the same violence and corruption many Mexicans have felt firsthand, but they're also wary of landing on Trump's bad side only weeks after inking an otherwise favorable NAFTA deal. Meyer says Mexico is taking a measured approach.
What they have said about this current caravan is reminding Central Americans and others about what their legal options are in Mexico, that if you do not have proper documentation to enter the country and if you're not seeking asylum, then there's really, no way for you to legally enter.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Well, we begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, 37 degrees Fahrenheit. Looks like we'll have nearly the same temperature as we had yesterday that we will have today, and that bears out since we had the same morning temperatures yesterday at 37. And the winds are still out of the east-northeast. Right now, a negligible 1 mile per hour, which is considered light and variable. And they will remain light and variable through the day, through the night, and through at least till tomorrow. Once again, we're going to have a high of around 82, the same as yesterday. A low, they say tonight, in the low 40s, so that'll be a little bit better than what we've had last night. And should be in the mid to low 40s for the next foreseeable several nights. Dry conditions will continue. Don't even give me 10% possibility of precipitation. But Tuesday, it looks like we may have some showers coming through, and I say showers. Ragweed pollen is moderate. The air quality index is in the good range, and though it is 23 parts per million, so kind of in the upper middle of that good range, indicative of people, once again, burning wood in their fireplaces to keep warm. The daytime UV index actually has ticked up into the moderate from the good range back into the moderate range at 3. And barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.12 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. and relative humidity is at 56%, expected to decrease by noon here today. All right, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 59 and cloudy. Paris is 69 and sunny. Rome is 75 degrees and fair. Kiev is 67 and fair. Kabul is 55 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and cloudy. Tokyo is 63 degrees and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 64 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. But New York is 54 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, but with a small craft advisory on all waterways because of heavy gusty winds, sometimes 60 miles per hour. Ouch! So take care. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Christine May, Duke of the Los Angeles Times, brings us this first offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. This year's midterm election is already the most expensive ever, with the total raised by House candidates nationwide surpassing $1 billion weeks before the November 6th election. In California, with at least 7 tightly contested races that could decide control of the House, Democrats seeking to win seats in areas long held by Republicans are raising staggering amounts of money. In those 7 races, Democrats raised $21.6 million over the last 3 months ending September 30th, while Republicans took in just $4.2 million in aggregate. The Republican candidates also had smaller cash revenues, with an average of about $652,000 at the end of the quarter. Their Democratic opponents, all of them running for office for the first time, had an average of more than $1.2 million in the bank. In an already challenging year for Republicans, the lack of resources could be crippling for their efforts to hold the House against Democrats energized by the resistance to Donald Trump. That would almost certainly require retaining several California districts. Democrats must net 23 GOP-held congressional seats to take control of the House. All but 3 of California's 12 Republican House incumbents running for re-election were outraised by their competitors in the third quarter. Only Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy of Bakersfield and Representatives Paul Cook of Yucca Valley and Ken Calvert of Corona raised more than their Democratic rivals. House candidates around the country have raised a total of $1.26 billion through September 30th, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. The previous national record was set in 2012, when candidates raised an aggregate of $1.12 billion for the entire 2-year cycle. The sharp increase in campaign cash is fueled largely by a near-record number of House challengers, and that was stated by Sarah Briner, the center's research director. "You have an energized left," she said, "intent on bringing down what they see as entrenched Republican incumbents, and that's putting money in races that previously have not seen it before." The record amounts of money could help little-known and first-time candidates counter the built-in advantages of incumbency. The soaring sums for many Democrats are being bolstered by an unprecedented flood of small donors, particularly those giving over online platforms such as ActBlue. Breiner's preliminary analysis suggests that Democrats' share of fundraising from donors giving $200 or less is twice that of their GOP candidates in this cycle. In California, GOP incumbents are having a hard time keeping up. The money picture is particularly lopsided in several Southern California districts, where the advertising market is pricey and oversaturated this campaign season. Indeed. In the 50th Congressional District, where Representative Duncan Hunter, Repug of Alpine, is facing federal campaign finance charges after an August indictment, Democratic challenger Amar Campanahayar raised more than 10 times the incumbent in the third quarter. He ended September with about $680,000 in the bank compared with Hunter's $247,000. In one race that's been closely watched, even though the GOP-held seat is deemed unlikely to flip, Devin Nunes of Tulare reported a $3.1 million haul, but that was eclipsed by the $4.4 million raised by opponent Andrew Jantz. Nunes, buoyed by his role as a staunch defender of Trump, still had a 7-figure lead in cash on hand over his challenger.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Finishing up here in the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is an article out of Raw Story by Reuters. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters. The volcanic eruption that destroyed the ancient Roman city of Pompeii probably took place 2 months later than previously thought, Italian officials said yesterday. Historians have traditionally dated the disaster to August 24th of 79 AD, but excavations on the vast site in southern Italy have unearthed a charcoal inscription written on a wall that includes a date which corresponds to this day, October 17th. Of 79 AD. The writing came from an area in a house that was apparently being renovated just before the nearby Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying Pompeii under a thick blanket of ash and rock. Being charcoal, fragile and evanescent, which could not last a long time, it is more than likely that it was written in October 79 AD, said Massimo Osana, head of the Pompeii site. The August 24th date derives from an account of the blast given by Pliny the Younger, who witnessed the eruption and wrote about it almost 30 years after the event in 2 later letters to his friend, the Roman historian Tacitus. However, previous excavations have uncovered a calcified branch bearing berries that normally only come out in autumn. The discovery of some braziers over the years also suggested the disaster did not strike at the height of summer. Osana suggested the correct date might have been really August or October 24th. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but we'll be back tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, and Networks Radio will broadcast on all day and all night for all that breaking news as it breaks, so stay tuned. And do tune in tomorrow when we visit with you in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goère. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.